Hello there, and welcome to Creatives in Conversation, a podcast series created by myself, visionary artist Roberto Birch. In this podcast, I'll be speaking with visual artist Rob Birch.
Hello, Rob.
Hiya.
How are you today?
Okay. Yeah. Fine. Thanks. Yeah. Sorry.
It's good to finally get the opportunity to have a conversation with you, Rob, because we kind of met through what we were just talking about there, an art fuddle through the Newbridge program, and I remember when we were having that art fuddle, it was like a webcam, I guess like a group session where we were just kind of talking about ideas and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I remember that you were quite, I felt like you weren't shy to express your ideas, and it sounded like you had a lot of ideas and maybe developed, well, not just ideas, like whole philosophies, which I really liked. I remember you saying about, you didn't say shy bairns getting out, but that's how I remembered it. In terms of being an artist and just being out there.
Yeah, I said there was no room for modesty. Because I don't believe in being modest about your art. It doesn't mean that you should be arrogant, but there's one of the things that we do, us Brits, us English, very much is that we hide our lights under a bushel. I feel, especially coming from my background. I was actually having a conversation about this today. Coming from a working class background, I wasn't supposed to be an artist. I wasn't supposed to be doing degrees. I wasn't supposed to be doing A levels. I should have been, left school at 15, got a job, and that was my life. But for some reason that didn't happen, and I realised at quite an early age that not voicing your opinion, should we say, if that's the opposite, if that's another way of describing not being modest, is paramount. As artists, we have something to say, and we should be able to say it through our work, and then whenever the forum arises, defend it if people want to, ask questions about it. I'm all for that. I'm all for being challenged on my work, as long as that's an informed opinion that comes back at me, and then I'm happy to engage, and I'm happy to be proved wrong. Not being modest doesn't mean that I think I'm always right. More often than not, I'm wrong. But I think that it's important that you position yourself in this way, so everything becomes, a debate and a question, and that you are open to change and not being too. I don't think I'm dogmatic about my art. And if I am, please tell me I am, and I'll try not to be. As simple as that. But yeah, that's my feeling on, as what we said at that the Newbridge thing, because I really do think that we shouldn't be afraid of voicing our opinions as artists. I mean, we're needed more than ever now in this day and age. So yeah, if we turn around, if someone's, I think, it's been unduly deferential to whatever in the name of modesty, I will call them out on it and say, you don't have to be like that. You can. You have a right to having an opinion, and if you do it through your work, then that's great. Let's discuss that.
It's quite a heroic act, isn't it? About just expressing what you perceive to be your perspective. Oh, well, not. I was going to say what you perceive to be your truth, but it's really your experience, isn't it? And how you see the world, and that self-expression.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose because I've come to this position in a really roundabout way. Like I said, as a kid, I wasn't expected to be doing this. I mean, I was smart enough to do O levels. I didn't do that well at O levels, but I got enough to go on to do A levels, and that got me into doing a foundation course. And up to that point, I didn't even know art colleges existed. I did a foundation course, and then it took me 5 years to get onto a degree course. And then, and that during that time, I went out and got a job. I was sitting in an office, and that was an incredible. I wouldn't say no. It wasn't. It was an invaluable experience. Working for Customs and Excise was not an incredible experience, but I do consider it to be invaluable because, that's what 99% of people do. They go out and they have jobs, and they earn a wage and they get a wage to support their families and their responsibilities. That's what my folks did, and just because I chose not to do that course. Actually, I don't know whether I chose or it just fell at my feet in as much. But when I look back at what my mum and dad did, and all our our neighbours, our communities were doing, they did all the same. There's an awful lot to be gained from that. Whether you like it or not, it's not the point. But I liked it enough to such a point that I finally got into art school. And the first thing I did when I got my letter was resign. It was the easiest letter I ever wrote. Thank you very much, but I'm out of here. Went and did my degree, came out. Then there was another, 1990? I didn't do my master's until 2006. So there was a good few years working, ducking and diving, doing little jobs, proper jobs, earning money, but always making the art. That's always been the case. And then got onto a master's, and that was brilliant. It was only a 1 year, really intense course, drawing-us process at Kingston University, run by Leo Duff. It was fantastic. She was really, really good. I went in there, right, I know what I want from this, and I made sure I got it. And what I wanted was some intellectual and theoretical rigour for my practice. And that also introduced me to computers. One of the tutors that was supporting Leo was testing Adobe Photoshop. So we're talking Photoshop 4, 5, which, is by today's standards was like cave painting. But he showed us what it was, and I was looking up at the screen, and I thought, well, that's a studio on a screen. You got your canvas, you got your swatches, you got your brushes, and I was painting and drawing at the time. So I invested in one of those big, thick aluminium MacBooks. I don't know if you remember the metal keyboards, real chunky things. God, yeah, my back got some muscles just carting that thing around from Peckham to Kingston every day. And and got into it, did that, and then eventually I find myself here doing the PhD, but it's been a long, convoluted route. But that experience, that what I did in all those years, is feeding directly into what I'm doing now, just as this event is, and whatever I do tomorrow and the day after and the day after, always comes back in some way or another, whether directly or indirectly, feeds into my work. Because I think I said at the session that I don't separate my work life from my personal life or my life, if you see what I mean. To me, it's just one thing. And that can be problematic at times, but at other times it gives me an edge that I think, especially talking to a lot of the researchers, my peers at the college, they come at it from a very analytical, boxed kind of way, and I think no, open the boxes, let it all fly. And I know it suits me. I'm not saying that's for everybody though.
It sounds to me, Rob, that the art has been a constant activity that you've always been doing. It sounds like even throughout whilst you've been working, you've been doing art. There's obviously something that you're getting from it. I'm curious to know what that is.
Oh, that's a really good question. There were so many answers to that question. I can go back to an early age. My family life, I'm the middle of 3 sons, and I've got a sister as well. But as the middle son, middle-itis as they call it, there was so I would do. Both my brothers are quite athletic and sporty, so sort of they caught their parents' attentions. They do things with my parents, especially my dad. My dad wasn't interested in art, so I would draw these pictures. I'd sit in. We had a little dining room. We had, we had a little semi-detached house up in the suburbs of London, and I'd sit there. And especially when I was working, I did this for donkey's years. I did I did an evening class at Goldsmiths doing life drawing, and I did that for 5 years. And then when I wasn't doing that, I'd get home about 6:30, sit down, have my dinner. 8 o'clock, I'd go into the dining room, put the radio on. First of all, it's probably going to mean nothing to you. It was David King Jensen, and then it was John Peel, and that was 4 hours of music, and then it was Janice Long and John Peel, and and I'd just sit there and paint and draw, and I'd just lock myself away, and occasionally I'd come out and make a cup of tea and stuff. But as far as my mum and dad were concerned, I disappeared for those hours, and I just really, really enjoyed doing it. And the motivation was, it was the one thing that I had over a lot of people, I guess, talent to draw. I mean, one of my earliest memories of drawing, and it's just popped in my head, was doing a picture for it's a Blue Peter art competition. I mean, that tells you how old I am, which was probably back in the days of John Noakes and Peter Purvis and Valerie Singleton. So but it is a form of affirmation, and I stuck to my guns because I didn't want anyone to tell me that I shouldn't be doing it. And the only time anyone did that was with my mum. We had a blazing row. Absolutely killer, and I was just bereft by the fact she thought I should give up on trying to get into art school, and I should, stick at my job, which was, like I say, was working for the civil service. So, I had a job for life there, but I never did. And I can't say I blame her, because she saw all the effort I'd put into trying to get into art school, and I get turned down every year. She was only looking out for me, looking back on it now. But it was like I don't know. I can't. It was I wanted just to show people that I could do this, I suppose, in a very simple. I mean, it sounds a real cliche, doesn't it? If you dream hard enough, this can happen. Well, I don't think I dreamed it. If it was a nightmare. But I did it, and I'm in this position now, and and now I'm in a position where I think what I've got, what I'm doing, is really actually quite important. With the research, I'm coming into areas that are finding, fundamentally, especially in this day and age, with the way the world is, and the way we sort of move and behave in it.
I'm really curious to know what it is that you're researching. But before we do dive into that, I'm just thinking, for anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with your work and hasn't seen your work, I'm wondering whether you'd be able to describe what your work looks like.
Well, the easiest way is go to my website and look at it there, robbirch.com. But it's portraiture. I call it portraits. It's ironic because when I did my degree, I was not a portrait painter. I was doing abstract stuff, big conceptual stuff, and to be honest, it was bloody awful. It was half-hearted, and the ideas were half-formed. And then after I finished art school, I got into a studio in Norwich where I did my degree. And then one day I woke up and I thought, this is crazy. Why am I doing this stuff? I should just do what I like, which is painting pictures and making images that people can relate to, and the portrait and figurative. Well, basically going from abstract to figuration. And the portrait was really fundamental in that. And the first one I ever did was it's a portrait of Phil Spector, funnily enough, standing. I don't know if you know the photograph. He's young. He's standing in front of the console in the studio, and he's looking very intense. Anyway, I did that, and so portraits really are important to me because I'm keen to explore the idea of what a portrait is, and how it's basically failed us as an evidential document of identity. We look at a portrait and we say that's the person, but I think you can't do that in this day and age. Yeah, they physically look like that, and you say, okay, you go to the National Portrait Gallery, you see a picture of someone famous, you say that's them. But that's all you can say. You don't know the person, you don't know what motivated that portrait to be made. And if you look at the research, say, into the National Portrait Gallery, that it's amazing, because that gallery was set up. One of the reasons was to put people like me in my place. I'm supposed to go there and look at these people and think, because they've had their portraits taken, they're better than me. that's being simplistic, I'll admit. There's a lot more to it, but that's the crux of the argument. And I refuse to accept that because, one, they're not, and two, in this day and age, you can't afford to have that opinion. So my practice has been to a point where I try to usurp that idea. I was described as a visual skeptic on my degree course, and I've been calling myself that ever since. And so I take the idea of identity, and what kind of portrait would you make if you don't believe in the idea of what a portrait is about? So using the computer, I do what I call digital photo collages, where I collage elements together. I have a base figure that I pull off the net, or take the photographs myself. I get them from whatever source imagery I can. And then upon that, I build this skepticism on top in layers, which is what Photoshop does. Works in layers, and it's great at that. And I've developed this technique of being able to create really painterly images by using Photoshop. There's tools in there where you can be very precise about what you select and then collage on top of your image, so you can get very painterly tones. Then I tend to not use this, when you look at a collage, you can see that it's cut out. I try not to do that, but, I do, because I can literally get down to the pixel and select a pixel. I mean, it'd be pointless, but, it is like that. And from there, I build up these images, and they're all portraits. I call them portraits, intellectually, theoretically, as well as actually, they are mature. And of course, they're all sit on the screen. I'm on a 15-inch laptop. So, but I print them up 1 meter by 120. So they're really big and they really get in your face. And I think they're interesting. And it's funny because what happened is that I basically about, I don't know, so it's from 2006 to 16, I stopped making that kind of work. I wasn't making that work because I was living in Cambridge. We'd set up a little arts charity, and I was doing work around that, socially inclusive activities, working with communities, hard to reach travellers, young kids, homeless, all that kind of thing. And it was great work, but it wasn't me. And in 2016, when we had the referendum and we got the result, suddenly it was like it's like licking a plug socket. It woke me up. It was a shock to the system. And out of that, I came back to this work, and I've moved from Cambridge down to Hythe, and now I live in Folkestone. And I've got a studio, I've got a PhD, I've got myself set up quite nicely. So yeah, this is the work. And the pictures, at the moment, they're looking very painterly, but I actually do incorporate very specific elements in some, and I'm thinking of going back. I've got a fantastic anatomy textbook, and I'm going to be photographing pages out of that, and then I'm going to put those on the collages, and looking at the idea of mutation as a way of showing how identity has changed or is changing. So that thing's, it's a bit half thought or through at the moment, but I'm working on it. I think
that sounds like a really good. I love that way how you've described the process as well. I mean, when I've taken a look at some of your artworks just via a screen, I haven't had the pleasure of seeing it in the flesh. I was actually quite surprised by what you were saying there about them not being paintings, because I'd looked at them and I just responded to them as if they were paintings, and I was looking at them via a screen.
I feel a bit of a fraud. No, I'm not a fraud, but they are. That's what I'm playing with as well, because traditionally the portrait is a painting or it's a very straight photograph now. That's about as far as the portrait has moved as regards to how it's rendered. I mean, you can go into maybe something like what Mark Quinn did with the blood head and the DNA portraits, but I think they're more of a gimmick at this stage. I'm not saying they're not relevant, but but my images, I like the idea of, because people, I mean, portraiture is such a middle to upper class thing to be doing. So to say I'm doing portraits and then people realising, well, first of all, they don't look like anybody. And secondly, they're actually flat digital prints with the illusion of painting. That's all part of that questioning and that skepticism that I'm about, trying to get people to think, well, if he's doing this, what does he mean? What is he trying to say? I also, at the same time, want to make nice images. I think they're very succulent, and they do invite you in. But it's a bit like a bacon. It's beautiful horror. You know, it's horrible beauty, whatever way you want to call it. You know, and bacon is a big influence on me.
I can definitely see bacon in your work, and I mean, especially with some of the sort of expressive sort of marks that come through. I was kind of thinking when I was looking at them, I kind of see this almost this gestural painterly strokes coming off someone's face.
Yes.
And quite often when I was looking through, I was like, oh, I recognise that face. Oh, I recognise that face. I recognise that face. And it kind of felt like just purely looking at them, I was getting like an emotional reaction from just the gestures that you were doing. So I can only imagine that potentially that's maybe expressing a part of your own.
It's very much the case. Yeah, I mean, it's very much the case of that. You know, I mean, a lot of chance goes into it. I mean, what I really like about using the computer is that the editing of the image, which for me is the making of it. It's not the putting the, you know, it's like when you paint, you put the paint down, and then by and large, unless you get at it pretty quickly, you know, like, by scraping the whole lot off every night, coming back the next morning and doing more. The editing is incredibly intuitive, and I invested in a drawing tablet, so I've actually got those gestures when I've got a pen in my hand and I'm moving things around, and and like I said to you, you know, I have all the tools at my disposal that I would have if I was painting, you know, brushes, palette knives, types of erasers, all kinds of weird shapes, and then I can pull upon my source imagery, and then I can, and you probably can see there are things I go back to time and time again. There's this strange bloke from Holland called Odd Newman, I think his name is, and he's very much in the Rembrandt school of painting, which is understandable being Dutch, and he's made a few pictures where I keep just the marks, the gestures that he's put in these paintings, and what I do is I always go back to the original source material. I never go and say, well, I've used it in that picture, I'm not going to use it in this one, because every time I select it, it'll be slightly different. So there are differences. But yeah, it is very, you know, sometimes I make mistakes. There was one that I did, I can't remember. It's not actually up on the website yet. And I put a shadow on it, and it didn't. Oh, that's not working. And then I did something, and then suddenly it became, wow. It just became something different. And that moment, for me, that's when, I mean, the one of the problems with using the computer is, you know, attempting to keep working on something. You know, it's not like I can turn it to the wall and it comes up. I mean, it's the same, I suppose, if you were painting. But when I get to that moment, oh, that's finished. When that picture starts, when it's no longer mine, shall we say, when I no longer can control or influence it or infect it, whatever way you want to look at it, when that happens, when it sort of takes on a life of its own, then I will put it away. And I have, it's quite systematic. I have a folder on the computer called Work in Progress, and then when it's finished, it gets put into a project folder. I tend to work in projects, and I give them titles. And then once they're in the folder, they get the piece gets entitled. I give it a name, because a lot of them are made up. They're all, I've got a random name generator website. I just key in, you know, the difficulty, and these names will come up. Or if it is someone specific, you know, in the public eye, I will call it like there was. I mean, I've done Trump, I've done the usual suspects, and then I've done a few sort of wacky stuff from other people. But yeah, and then it moves out, and then it's done. And then I used to believe that was enough, but you do need to put it out there. So that's one that goes on the website, and then if I got an exhibition coming up, I will print them up, and then that's when the works. Because it's totally different. It's totally different from seeing it from a little screen. I mean, it's like the difference between talking to you on Zoom and meeting you in real life. It's and if you want to know, I went to a Bacon show last year. It was at the Gagauzins, called Couples or Couplings. I can't remember, but it was all the couple pictures. And I know Bacon, like the back of my hand, or I thought I did anyway, because I'd seen him in the books. I mean, when I used to work at Tate, I used to work past the triptych that they've got all the time, so I knew that one really well. But I walked into this show, and for the first time in my life, I decided not to say anything. It's just like, wow, the paint, the physicality of it, the honesty, the integrity in the painting was so obvious and so visceral and so corporeal there. It was right in your face. And I thought, nah, there's nothing you can think about here, Rob. You're in the presence of I want to say a master or a genius, but yeah, I was. And that's why, I believe that you should be able to put your work out there. And of course, it's a test. It's scary. It's worrying if someone says something that you don't like. But I learned a long time ago, you can't second guess your audience. They will say whatever it is they want to say, and the fact that they might say something is better than them saying nothing. So if someone wants to say that one of my pictures looks like a St. Bernard running through the snow, which someone did once, you just say, yeah, thank you very much. It's a St. Bernard running through the snow. But yeah, it is. But it's you shouldn't second guess your audience, but at the same time, you should be happy to put yourself out there and to hear what they've got to say. I mean, especially young artists, that's how you learn. I mean, if I come across as confident about it, that's because I've been through that process and been knocked back, and I've had bad things, good things, informed, uninformed things said about me and my work. Well, that's fine. You just adjust accordingly.
I think there's a great deal of honesty that comes with your work, even in the way it's evident in the way that you express sort of marks within your digital images, in the way that you kind of speak about your work, but as well as that, to kind of come at it from a perspective of, this is the work here, this is what I'm doing, but at the same time, it's not what you think it is until you see it. There was a point I was going to make. I think I've lost it. So that's me losing a train of thought.
That's okay.
But I really like what you were saying about seeing Bacon in the flesh and sort of being sort of awestruck in his presence. There's only been a couple of times. Well, not really. I say a couple of times. It's almost constant for myself seeing like whenever I've gone into a gallery and seen a really good painting, to kind of feel as if the artist has literally just made the mark and left the room. And even though this painting might have been done, a few hundred years ago. Yeah. So I can definitely relate to that. Go on. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that thing about honesty. To me, being honest, that's what I try to be right across the board. I fail miserably in so many places, but one of the places I don't think I fail is in my work, because it's the one place where it's a safe forum for me. I'm not up against, because people will always say, well, that's your opinion. Well, okay, yeah, I can't stand it when people say that, but it gives you a point. But especially young artists, I think they've got to be honest with themselves and with their work. They got to understand why they are making their art and what it's for. I don't believe in ideas. I think if you have if I have an idea, I think about it, I ruminate, cogitate, I think a bit more about it, and then I throw it away, because ideas don't work in my opinion, here we go, I'm saying it already, but there is a truth there that comes from experience. There are things that, and the only way you access that is by being honest with yourself. So that's why I gave up from being an abstract painter to becoming a figurative painter, because I did not believe in what I was doing when I was making abstract paintings. I was trying to understand the language and I couldn't, or I didn't want to. So I thought, what's the most direct language that people would understand? And that is representation. If you paint something to look like something, then that's your intent and people are going to see that. Now, there's loads of scope within that. And that's, look at Bacon, look at Picasso, look at Cubism, look at, any great painter, any great artist. They will try and be, find the most eloquent way of getting to the most direct route to your brain and your heart through their work, So I was at the National Gallery a couple of weeks ago and I just made a beeline for the Rembrandts, the portraits of the old man and the old woman. I look at them and literally, you want to go and see if the paint's still wet. It's like that. And they were painted hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But they speak to me today about what it is, to be old, because I'm getting on a bit myself and I'm beginning to feel the aches and pains. But, these sorts of things. And I think it's difficult to be honest when you go through the system, when you go through the art school system. I think they don't want you to be honest. They want you to follow it. And I'm seeing that, I'm at the Royal College of Art, and it is very much, they want you to conform to an idea of what they think a Royal College of Art student is. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I'm too long in the tooth to say, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir, So I use the place, I work at it, but I won't scrimp on. I mean, funnily enough, one of my supervisors, Peter Kennard, political artist, I don't know if you know him, did all the CND stuff back in the early 70s, 80s. Really, really good artist, political artist. And I think, he sort of kind of agrees with me. He's I sit there and I talk to him about this stuff. And we very rarely talk about the PhD, funnily enough. We talk about the art and what's going on. And it's about not being afraid to take a risk. And I think being honest is taking a risk, especially in this day and age. So if you can get it going,
yeah, definitely. And you actually reminded me, I'd said I've lost my train of thought. You reminded me of what I was going to talk about. If anything, you kind of you'd pulled it out of me in a sense. What I was going to say was that there's an honesty in what you're saying about the about being figurative and being representational to some degree, because I know you do sort of distort and exaggerate in some ways. And what I was going to say was, I kind of get the sense that sometimes when you see an artwork that's overly conceptual, you feel like you're no closer to understanding that person's experience than you are if you were to read a heavily conceptual book. It kind of feels like an intellectualism that takes over and almost puts a space between you and the artist. It's like, well, look at that, don't look at me in any sense.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the trouble with conceptualism for me is that, yes, I mean, the idea could be brilliant, don't get me wrong, and it could be fundamentally important, but you have to understand the language of conceptualism before you can understand the art. And I just think that cuts out so many people. That will be, you're preaching to the choir there, because people who understand it, okay, that's fine, that's great. And we see that in the way the arts are represented in the media. They all know each other. They all, best friends, and they go to the openings and, oh, hello, Tracy. Oh, hello. What's his name from The Guardian? Oh, God. I can't remember his name now. He's bloody awful critic. Anyway, and you just know that this is the way it is. And let's not kid ourselves. The art world is very, very incestuous. People know people, and that's all. And there's nothing new in any walk of life. People get the gigs. I mean, that's one of the reasons I've gone to the Royal College. So when people see, oh, I've been to the Royal College, that will open doors for me. I'm going to burn in hell for saying that, but that's true. You know, it's the way it is. But whilst I make work that is should we say representational, like it is a figure or it is a portrait, I try to avoid representationalism. You know, the idea that things have to look like they're supposed to look, because I think that's another layer of thought and intellectual rigor that's laid on top of art that keeps a lot of people away from looking at it. I mean, I'm from Peckham, you know. I can't be highfalutin. I can't think like, you know, a great Michael Craig Martin. Is it Michael Craig Martin? Or, you know, the oak tree, you know, the glass thing. You know, I just don't get it. It's a glass of water on a shelf. You know, I understand that, you know, the idea is paramount there. But, you know, everybody, if I took all the people I knew from when I was a kid to see that work of art, they would just laugh at me and tell me, oh, come on, Rob, let's go down to the pub, you know. And why are we denying those people the opportunity to understand in art, to have access to it, to feel that it can actually inform their lives? Yeah, in that respect, I'm all for turning it all over and on its head and getting ordinary people, whatever that may mean, you know, to see that art is part of their lives. My ideal situation is to, as an artist, is to be embedded in my community. When people see me, they see me in much the same way as they see a plumber or a street cleaner or someone who sits in an office, a secretary or whatever. I'm just another member of that community. I just make art. I mean, there are communities like that, you know. I mean, and those places normally don't even have a word for art, you know, things like the Aboriginal cultures. You know, they make fantastic art, but it serves a different purpose. It tells the people who they are. I don't think people quite realise that's what art can do for them. So, yeah, it is. That's my rant against the idea of ideas.
Well, it's interesting that you kind of within your art, you're very much connecting on a personal level to the political, and you know that figure of speech, or that phrase, the personal is the political and the political is the personal.
Yeah.
I think you very much embody that within your work, especially at a time now where it's kind of feeling like either people are giving up on politics or people are afraid to actually say what they feel about politics. You know, I guess on the whole, well, the environment that we're living in now, which is everybody's on an extreme perspective in some sense, and everybody feels like they can't say anything because it's unsafe in some way, or it's going to be met with conflict, rather than, from what you were saying there, is just by having the conversation. You know, you're open to the idea of somebody being, you know, of the opposite perspective to yourself, but you're kind of open to the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, especially recently with the stuff that's happened with the football. You know, when the footballers have come back and well, let's say they marked the card of Johnson and Priti Patel because of what they said before about, you know, taking the knee is, you know, gesture politics, and then, you know, saying that they're against racism. You know, and I thought it was great what the footballers said. I didn't actually watch the match. I wasn't that interested in the football, but the political side of it, where these guys like Sterling and Tyrone Mings, all these guys have actually finding a voice now and saying, well, this is what's going on for us. Sort of brings it up. You know, I mean, when I was a kid, we played football. It was coach for goalpost, you know, on the grass, and we'd play for hours. But you can't, especially, you know, those guys, they can't sit on their hands and do nothing. They can't say nothing. Not because, you know, the footballers, but because as black people, they're experiencing this stuff. So when, you know, a politician says in one hand, you know, you're wrong to protest, and then on the other hand says, well, you know, you know, the people that what you're protesting about is terrible. It's great that they say this stuff, and the same thing with all of the Black Lives Matters, the Me Too, Occupy. All these guys are actually raising the level of awareness of how this world is, I think I'm just trying to do the same through my work, and I'll be happy to talk to people about that, or actually have them look at the work and say, well, yeah, what is going on in this world when this guy makes pictures like this? And, the idea is that they think it through. I'm not going to tell them what to think. They think it through. So, yeah, it is. I mean, it's really, I keep saying, now's the time not to lose courage. Now's the time not to drop the ball and get worried and be browbeaten by the people who tell you shouldn't be doing this. Because I never did. And yeah, it's been a long journey, like I said, but I'm doing it. And yeah, if you've got a voice, express it. It's great that these, and especially at such a young age. What was it? I don't know. All in their 20s, isn't it? And that sort of thing.
They're all very young, aren't they?
Yeah, and they live closeted life. They're professional sportsmen, and they're reaping the benefits of their skills, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't use that as a reason to say shut up. When you're earning, I don't know, 100k a week, and then you're still getting stopped by the police because you're a black man in a car. Sorry, what has your earnings got to do with that? Probably because you're driving a nice car,
They just want to take a look at the inside. But
yeah. Well, if they did that, if they said that when they pulled them over and says, "Oh, well, hello, Rabbi, that's really great. Love your motor. So, see what you've done there. That's great." But they don't, do they?
But that's
anyway.
not the reality, is it? What people are experiencing.
No.
It's really interesting that sort of political side of. I just find politics so interesting at the moment, because you've kind of got this juxtaposition in this environment where you've got the internet, and then you've got people developing perspectives without conversation,
Yes.
just purely by observing other people expressing their political perspective,
Yeah.
and then never being challenged on it. And I live in the Northeast, and have attended workshops about radicalization, and in the Northeast, the issue is white supremacist groups. It isn't Islamist radical Islam or anything like that. It's a different thing, and kind of wonder where that comes from. And then I reflect on my own experience of just watch YouTube videos on one particular topic, and you can see where these characters that come out with really extreme perspectives.
Yeah, definitely. I live here down in Folkestone, and we've got a huge immigrant population, because a lot of the people who come over stay here, because it's the first port of call, the whole South Coast. But it is so easy to get into and I think that the people who are saying this know this. Your Trumps of this world, your Farages, they know that if we shout louder than the left or the Liberals or the people with common sense, then people are going to hear us. I come from Peckham, and I went to school in Bermondsey. And Bermondsey is this little enclave of white working classness, which is not necessarily a bad thing. They're all Millwall supporters, that's the thing. And they are very much isolated in the way they think. They do think that they're under attack. They've done the immigrants or the blacks or the Asians have come over, taken our job. And I don't know. I've never heard any example where someone got a job because they were Asian or black over a white. I've just not heard it. But so where do they get that from? And it is these people who have other agendas. Whether it's politicians in power, people, like a lot of these American shock jocks, who just, and the thing to remember, and this is why I devalue what they say, excuse me, is the fact is they're paid an awful lot of money to say what they say. And if they haven't got the nerve or the balls to say that without getting paid, then what they say is not worth listening to. Because I will say that if someone was paying me £1 million a year, but then I say that I wouldn't take the job, but but these people have got very, very clear agendas, and it's and whatever you say about it, people like Trump and Farage are very good at it. They are very, very good at it, and we need to be on our guard all the time. So I look at this stuff. I mean, I was just watching a video, some American woman banging on about the trans thing, and there's this trans weightlifter, you know, and I'm thinking, in the scheme of things, what does it matter? I mean, she's lifting weights. You know, you're making it. Because this is what they do. They conflate things and make them a hell of a lot bigger, or appear to be a hell of a lot bigger than what they actually are. So now this becomes a huge issue. And whilst that's going on, I just feel like, you know, they're watching us, and they are very much manipulating people. You know,
it's almost like a divide and conquer kind of strategy, isn't it? Which is get people, you know, people fight amongst themselves, then we could take the money over here or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I also, the other thing I liken it to is the Stockholm syndrome. You know, people then look benevolently upon their oppressors or their kidnappers. You know, it's we've been under the cosh for so long, we think that these guys are on our side. They're not. First of all, they're politicians. They're only on one side, which is their own. And I don't care whether that's left or right. And that's, again, my opinion. I have to be careful what I say. But I do feel that's the case. I think that if we listen to, you know, we are suckered into this. And especially a lot of communities that have quite right, and I'm sure the same up north where you are, you know, communities have been decimated with all the industries closing, the factories closing, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of disaffected workers up there. And who's going to be on their side and speak for them? And it is going to be these guys who come in and say these things. And when I hear, I mean, I did see it a few years ago now, but I think it's still relevant. You know, that I think it was, they were talking, there was an election coming up, and they said, "Oh, the Liberals and it's going between the Liberals and the Conservatives," and the Labour Party says, "Well, we're not going to bother then." How do they expect people to agree with anything they say when they're not even prepared to talk to the people that they're supposed to be, you know, representing? And if that's the quality of our politics, where whatever party is not talking to the people, and then right-wing extreme parties are, then people are going to follow that view. I mean, I've met a lot of people who just needed to be pulled up on that kind of thinking. Well, you know, they take our jobs, they do this, they do that. And in the end, it's, well, no, they don't. You know, that's what you've been told. That's what the Daily Mail tells you. You know, don't listen to it. They've got other things going for it. And it's a means of keeping us under control, I feel. I don't know what that's got to do with my work. I don't know. Well, but it is. It's got a lot to do with my work. You know, not that overtly. But like I said earlier on, I don't filter between the two. I don't filter between my work and my politics and my life and my social life or whatever. It's all one and the same thing, you know. And so I think it's all relevant. I mean, especially if you look at the portrait, you know, and that becomes this document of, I do actually consider it to be a document of oppression, you know, especially when you've got Lord and Lady Muck standing under a tree, you know, looking at you, and to say, this is my land. I'm looking at it at the moment. It's Gainsborough, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I think it is. I don't have to know the one. It's in the National.
I know which one you're talking. It's they're kind of like to the left, aren't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Their land.
All the land, and it's got a little dog looking up at him. And
yeah. I definitely see skepticism in your work, because you kind of like, it's almost as if you're pulling their face apart, or whoever you're portraying, you're like pulling their face apart. And
what you're doing is you're denying them the voice that they have been used to expressing for generations. And it's not that I want to impose violence on them physically, but I can in my work. And I want to pull apart this idea that only certain people get their portraits made, and then there's only a certain way to make a portrait. And I don't think that's the case. You know, my favourite portrait, actually, one of my favourite portraits is Tracy Emin's Tim. I think that's a beautiful, I mean, I know it's no longer exists because it went up in flames, but I think it's a beautifully poignant, sensitive, delicate self-portrait. I mean, it talks specifically about a certain aspect of the artist's life, but that aspect of that artist's life is universal, especially for a lot of girls, a lot of women. You know, they went through, or have gone through, or are going through much the same. And this woman who's got, for want of a better phrase, the brass neck to actually say, oh, this is how it is. And I think she's a fantastic artist. I think when she does that kind of work, I think her filmmaking's not so clever. But we went to see some paintings, and the paintings were brilliant. And she married a rock in France as well, which I thought was hilarious. I don't know if you heard about that.
I didn't hear
because
about that.
I think it was just before, because she's had the cancer, and it was just before that, and she I think she'd been diagnosed, and she just thought, oh, I can't be dealing with relationships. There's this lovely rock in my garden in France, I'll marry it. And there's a picture of her in a wedding dress standing in front of the rock. I think I got that right. I mean, I'm sure there's people that are going to tell me I got it wrong. But again, you know, but it's interesting because she comes with a certain image, you know, of that's built upon the YBAs and that TV program where she turned up drunk and all the rest of it. But underneath it all, she's a serious artist, and I have a lot of respect for her, and I think she does some really, really good work. And yeah, and it's about her life. I think we have a similar approach. And then you do worry whether you've got enough material, and then I look at the political situation. I think, God, there's too much material. You know, I can't really. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Rob, I've got one question which. I have asked everyone I've been on the podcast so far.
Okay.
I feel like it would be wrong for me not to ask you.
Please ask away.
We talked about. If there was one thing that you could change about the world, what would it be?
One thing to change about the world? Well, I'm tempted to say I wouldn't change it, because I think, you know, despite all its issues, it's pretty damn perfect. And that's perfect because of all the issues. You know, we are weak, fallible human beings, but that's what makes us so bloody interesting. You know, I wouldn't want to live in a perfect world. It's like, do you remember The Matrix, and he's talking to the architect, and he said the first problem is we made it too perfect and they wouldn't accept it? Yeah, I agree with him on that one. But if I could actually change something,
Don't feel forced to choose something, just because when I first heard that question, I was always wondering whether there would be someone so bold to say I wouldn't change anything.
Well, okay, in that case, I won't change anything.
Because you know, to kind of say I wouldn't change anything kind of puts you in the position where, like, it's a risky position to be in, isn't it? Because people go, well, with all the horrible things that are going on in the world, and you wouldn't do it, and go, but what about all the good things? And what about, you know, those things wouldn't exist if you didn't have them to compare.
Yeah, that's it. That's how we know ourselves. It's not necessarily for the good things that happen in the world. I mean, if you want to use the football analogy, we lost the European Football Championship. How are we going to react to that? I mean, a lot of people have reacted quite badly. Well, you know. You know, do something about it. You know, that's how you instigate change. You can't sit back in your hands and think, you know, that it's you know, that a perfect world is to be aimed for. Because I think, God, it's like, you know, oh, we want to live forever. I mean, when I lived in Cambridge, there used to be a guy who believed that with the right diet and the right circumstances, he could live forever. And this was an academic at Cambridge University. And I thought to myself, God, that would be bloody awful. Why would I live forever? The only reason I do what I do is because I know I'm only on this world for a certain amount of time. And it's infinitesimal compared to how long the world's been around. And I'm interested in what it will be in 1,000 years from now. I'm interested in what it was 1,000 years ago. You know, but I'm here now. I have to deal with Trump and Johnson and not winning the football. You know, that's my life. That's my experience. And that's why I wouldn't want to change it. I just think, no. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. I've had my own, my demons to fight over the years, but I really wouldn't want to change it, I suppose. Maybe a never-ending supply of fish and chips, if I'm going to be facetious. Because living down the coast, we do get rather nice fish and chips around here. But no,
bet.
I wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't. So I'm glad that's the answer you were
No,
looking for.
there was no right or wrong answer. It was
No,
just,
there isn't. No.
It was just interesting that that's what you said as the first thing.
That's the interesting thing, what you just said there. There is no right or wrong answer. There is only the answer that fits you at any given time. And that's not fixed. That changes every day, every hour, every nanosecond, you know. And all you need to be is, if you choose to be, like I have and you have and most artists have, is you've got to be brave enough to explore what that means. In my opinion, you know, I could come up with a lot of facetious answers about how I'd want the world to change, but to be honest with you, I'm too busy enjoying this one to instigate any changes. Oh, that's quite deep.
It was,
quite like that.
It was very deep. Yeah, I was going to interrupt.
No, but I do genuinely believe it. Yeah, it is, and you know, it's quite funny because where I live, I can actually see France. I live literally on the harbour in Folkestone, and on a good day, in fact, the sun is shining, and I look over there and I think, bloody hell, you know, that's a different country, that's a different culture. They eat frogs' legs. They've built the Eiffel Tower. They gave the world Eric Cantona or whatever, you know. And I think, oh God, wouldn't it be great to explore that? You know, wouldn't it be great to push yourself to go over there, metaphorically speaking, you know? But this is the thing: is that, you know, the world's full of mystery. And okay, and I know scientists are hell bent on trying to blow the mystery away. They want to understand everything. But the problem is my experience is that once they've got that, there'll be something else that'll come up that they need to know about that. You know, that's the way the world works. It is undeniably mysterious, and let's tread lightly and explore that.
Well, Rob, I think that's a great place to kind of sort of set ourselves aside and close. But what I'd really like to ask, Rob, is would you be able to let people know where people can find you if they want to find out more about your work? Or
where they can find out about me? Well, yeah, like I said, the website, www.robbirch.com. I do a Twitter, and which is only my socials are only about my artwork. I don't put anything else up. I don't photograph my food. Nice plate of fish and chips from the pilot. None of that stuff. So Twitter is at Rob Birch, and Instagram is Rob Birch 2001. If you Google me, you will get the lead singer from the Stereo MCs because we share the same name. You need to dig a little deeper, and you will find me if you Google me. But those will get you to where, and I would welcome any feedback from this. I mean, if someone wants to say I've been talking complete nonsense, if you could explain to me why, I will listen, and then I will come back and say yes, I agree or I don't agree. But and no artist works in a vacuum. We need to have feedback on what we do. Now, 9 times out of 10, it's our peers and well, in my case, like fellow students. But anybody can do that, as far as I'm concerned, as long as they come armed with, you know, an open mind. I'm more than happy to engage in conversations, whether Zoom, email, whatever.
That's beautiful, Rob. Okay. It sounds like you're an open book, and
I am.
I could easily keep having this conversation with
you,
but literally that hour went so quick.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel I'm well past my due date, you know, like a library book, and I need to be put back on the shelf. But no, I do enjoy. One of the things I'm also concerned about is I want to destroy the idea of the artist as someone who's mysterious in themselves. No, our practice. No one's going to do what I do. You know, no one's. I mean, I could tell it. I've told everybody my themes because they're not me. I have my take on it, and that's how the work I make. So this idea that somehow I should hide myself in a garret and just step out and just, you know, every now and again have an exhibition and then disappear again. You know, the idea of the artist as some great commentator of life. I don't want to be that person. I want to be in that community. I want to be talking to people and be very much part of their everyday lives as and when they would want it, obviously. Not knock on the
I couldn't
door
agree
saying,
with
can
you
you
more, Rob. Yeah,
feed poor starving artists. Okay then.
Thank you, Rob.
All right
Thank
then.
you.
Okay, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.